This is a street ruled by the mafia, a place riddled with violence and crime. A man sees a woman being beaten for not making enough money. The phone rings urgently, but he ignores it. Instead, an white-haired man rushes in to answer it. They run a handyman office here, literally a small business that provides conveniences for others for a fee. Today, their task is to deal with a troublemaker for Granny, who runs a shop in the restricted area. Nicholas also steals money from the thug and splits it with Warwick. Then, noise comes from the alley next door. A man, cursing, comes out with his pants in his hand, followed by a woman with a bloodied nose, the prostitute from downstairs. Granny impatiently shoves the woman away, indicating this is not a place for her business. Lately, a group of strangers have been frequently coming and going, disregarding the rules. The woman walks down the stairs. A handkerchief falls on her head, but no one is above anymore. After a meeting among the mafia leaders, to calm the recent unrest on the streets, they decide to hire a neutral party to solve the problem. On the other side, Warwick and Nicholas visited a weapon shop where they shared Granny's stewed lamb with the owner, Connie. They discussed a new gang that has recently become rampant, even stealing goods from the weapon shop. Officer Chad from the police station arranged a meeting with them. The new gang, led by Barry, has expanded its activities, even trading in the restricted area. The police, pressured by higher-ups, are unable to act, so they tasked the handyman office with completely destroying this gang, including their women, which Warwick found disheartening. Chad warned them against any tricks, cautioning that angering the four major families could lead to their deaths without them even knowing. They could take the spoils freely, but had to hand over the bodies. Although the cleanup fee was modest, it was a significant business opportunity. Officer Cody only then realized that Nicholas was deaf. Although he cannot hear, his eyes are sharp. When whispering, "If you don't cover your mouth, he will know all your secrets." Barry is planning to sell goods on 7th Street, stirring up relationships between other powers. Warwick met the prostitute again in the alley. She apologized for dirtying his handkerchief, but Warwick explained it belonged to Nicholas. The woman then made a thank you gesture through the window, a sign language she learned from them. She didn't follow Barry by choice but had nowhere else to go. Before leaving, Warwick told her Barry wouldn't be coming back. At that moment, Nicholas was slaughtering the thugs. Barry, seeing Nicholas's dangling tags, panicked and fled. However, Nicholas was fierce like a wild beast released from a cage, his knife quicker than a gun. Barry tried to bribe Nicholas with double the price, to no avail. Before Nicholas could act, 3 gunshots rang out. Warwick complained that Nicholas acted prematurely without waiting for him. Barry struggled to reach for a gun, but Nicholas pinned his hand to the ground with a knife. Desperate to live, Barry pleaded for mercy. Warwick whispered to him that they relished killing idiots who broke the street's rules. As the woman arrived breathlessly, Nicholas had already begun dealing with the bodies. Seeing Barry dead, the woman was distressed. Where could she go now? She picked up a gun, emptied the magazine into Barry's corpse, and left crying. Chad was on time to receive them for the task handover, but was shocked to see they brought Barry's woman. Warwick declared her as their spoils, reminding Chad that he had agreed they could take anything.
The Mafia won't turn a blind eye to you helping one of their damn runaways!
We don't take orders from you. I don't want you getting the wrong idea, all right?
Cody shivered with fear in the car. Chad, unable to do anything about them, simply paid them off and sent them on their way. Thus, the woman named Alex became a member of the handyman office. Tag holders are the most feared presence on this street. Even The Rock would flee upon encountering one. Elsewhere, a girl knocked on the door of the handyman office, but was startled to see Alex and a naked Warwick, causing her to flee. She ran into Nicholas, who was returning from shopping. The girl, Nina, is a nurse from Dr. Theo's clinic and has a close relationship with Nicholas. Dr. Theo had provoked a tag holder with B-level skills or higher. Hearing this, Nicholas got excited. Nina handed Nicholas 2 bottles of medicine, which he consumed without regard to dosage, earning a scolding from her. Warwick noticed 3 suspicious figures downstairs and told Nicholas to take Nina and leave while he dealt with them. Indeed, the 3 were tracking Nina. Just as they were about to make their move, Alex approached them, offering services and successfully diverting their attention. Warwick silently appeared behind them and cleanly shot them. Alex complained that Warwick shot without warning, dirtying her clothes and expressing disgust at the killing. While disposing of the bodies, Warwick discovered they carried mercenary tags. different from Nicholas's. In front of the hospital, tag holder Arnold was persuading Dr. Theo to join his group with his subordinates. However, the doctor refused to join any organization. Arnold then pulled out a photo of Nina to threaten the doctor. Just then, Nina and Nicholas arrived. Arnold, frustrated, vented on his subordinates for failing to capture a little girl. He then turned his attention to Nicholas, having heard that Nicholas was a rare Asian tag holder. Arnold boasted about his B2 level tag, but Nicholas ignored him and asked the doctor if there was anything to be cautious about. The doctor had no special requests, only that they should not trouble Officer Chad and keep Nina safe. Seeing Nicholas with a samurai sword, Arnold scoffed, dismissing it as an outdated and likely D-level weapon. Nicholas tightened his grip on the sheath and held up 3 fingers, signaling he would take Arnold down in 3 minutes. For Nicholas, this was just an ordinary skirmish.
You want to know what's going to take 3 minutes?
The doctor instructed Nina to enter the room through the window to notify Officer Chad, as he had lost his keys and could not enter. When the thugs realized Nina was trying to escape, they quickly pursued her, but one suddenly fell. The doctor revealed a row of syringes under his clothes, warning not to anger a doctor. Nicholas moved agilely, making it impossible for Arnold to touch him. The doctor, growing impatient, urged Nicholas to quickly finish off Arnold. As he spoke, Arnold attempted a sneak attack on Nicholas, who instinctively blocked with his sword, but Arnold's iron rod stuck into the hospital wall, greatly displeasing the doctor. Meanwhile, Chad received a call from Nina saying Nicholas was fighting with a tag holder at the hospital entrance. The doctor, angry, grabbed Nicholas, intending to inject him. Nicholas frantically explained using sign language. Arnold, feeling mocked, grabbed a drain pipe and swung it at them. Nicholas pushed the doctor aside and cut the pipe in half with a single slash.
I'll take your face and turn it into a pile of friggin' mincemeat.
Elsewhere, Warwick was explaining tag holders to Alex. They represent a unique group on the street, and the tags serve as a warning, like a caution about a fierce dog.
They're special, all right, but not that special.
Nicholas leaped into the air and severely injured Arnold with a single strike. It was surprising that a B-level individual was sent as cannon fodder to the doctor's place. While the incident didn't have a major impact, they still received a scolding from Officer Chad, who warned that any conflicts with tag holders must be under their supervision. Alex was terrified by the scene of Nicholas killing someone. The doctor handed her a blank piece of paper. Nina came over to comfort her. Alex asked if she wasn't afraid of Nicholas. Nina's expression turned sad, indicating that Alex found Nicholas frightening because she didn't understand him, and mentioned the Twilights. However, Warwick then took Alex away. As for Arnold, after returning to his organization, he was disposed of as a failure. Warwick woke up from a dream in which he saw his father die at the hands of Nicholas when they were children. In the morning, Alex found Nicholas had returned from outside and noticed the tattoo on his back. Their task for the day was to deliver medicine for Dr. Theo. Warwick had other work, so he asked Alex to help Nicholas and to buy him a pack of cigarettes. On the way, Alex curiously asked if Warwick had other work, but Nicholas did not respond. As Alex felt disappointed, Nicholas mentioned that Warwick was actually a gigolo. They passed Granny's shop where Nicholas was seen walking with a prostitute. Granny refused to read sign language and insisted that Nicholas speak to her, so Nicholas told her Alex was his woman and asked Granny not to dislike her. Nicholas went upstairs to deliver goods and asked Alex to wait below. Suddenly, Alex remembered Warwick's request for cigarettes but forgot to ask which brand to buy. While she hesitated, Granny had already placed a pack of cheap cigarettes on the table, the only kind Warwick had smoked since long ago. In Warwick's line of work, getting too close to a woman could hinder business, so he uses Nicholas as a shield. At that moment, Alex noticed a newspaper article Granny was holding about a white-haired boy. 22 years ago, the Arcangelo family was massacred, and their 13-year-old son was kidnapped and fled. It was widely recognized that this street attracted people with hidden pasts. Granny advised Alex not to stay here too long. Nicholas completed his delivery smoothly. Warwick finished serving his client, and then Warwick returned to work with Nicholas. The leader of the Cristiano family invited them to a party next week. Meanwhile, the Monroe family was conducting an execution ceremony. The entire street was buzzing with news of Nicholas's fight with a B2 level opponent. Daniel invited Nicholas to rejoin his family once again, but Nicholas refused. Eventually, they arrived at a brothel where Warwick was very popular, having worked there previously, though much had happened since then. Warwick looked unhappy, and Nicholas was reluctant to enter the brothel. Suddenly, a woman approached Warwick, questioning why he was still associating with the cursed tag holder. Angrily, Warwick pinned her against the wall and threatened her. Fortunately, the owner, Georgiana, intervened. The brothel was owned by the Corsica family, known for their disdain for twilights, but Georgiana understood that the so-called twilights were merely patients suffering from their medication. Warwick asked Georgiana to apologize to the woman. They had come to deliver a special medication for twilights. After delivering the medication, Warwick returned to his regular job, sending Alex and Nicholas back first. However, Alex noticed Nicholas entering a woman's room. The next day, Nicholas left early as usual. Alex quietly pushed open the door to Warwick's room and saw that Warwick had a tattoo similar to Nicholas's. When Warwick woke up, he found the room empty. Alex had silently left, but was actually back in the alley downstairs. Alex asked Warwick when he started working as a gigolo. Warwick and Nicholas had come here at the age of 13 and started working for Georgiana the following year. As for why things turned out this way, Warwick said it was a long story from the past. Several decomposing male bodies were discovered inside an abandoned factory on 6th Street. The victims had no identification on them, making the police investigation difficult. Today, the handyman office was unusually quiet because Warwick and Nicholas had been arrested by Chad. Nicholas would listen to no one but Chad, causing Cody, who was interrogating him, quite a headache. Meanwhile, Chad and Warwick were in another room, watching the situation unfold. Chad was now 56 years old, and both Warwick and Nicholas were over 30. Their bond had lasted for many years. Suddenly, Nicholas showed Warwick a wanted poster from when they were 17 through the glass. Warwick was shocked at how he had aged from a boy to an uncle, yet Nicholas looked the same after all these years. Then he told Nicholas to throw the poster away. Remembering Warwick's painful past in the police station, Chad felt they had indeed changed. The main reason for their arrest was the massacre on 6th Street, but Chad didn't suspect them. It was just a formality for the higher-ups, and he enlisted the handyman to resolve the case. Then Chad switched places with Cody for the interrogation and showed Warwick the available information. Alex, left alone at the handyman office, recalled Granny's words about Nicholas once protecting a misguided prostitute, nearly getting killed in the process. Consequently, Alex decided to return the handkerchief to Nicholas. Suddenly, she was confronted with the body of Barry, who mocked her belief that she could ever be a good person. Trembling, Alex reassured herself that Warwick and Nicholas would never treat her that way. Cody moved to Warwick's interrogation room and handed him the files. Warwick was to use these documents to deduce the identities of the victims. He possessed an incredibly sharp memory, arranging and combining data in his mind with clarity. By examining minor details on the bodies, he could determine their identities. He quickly relayed all the victims' information to Cody. Warwick, who had shown an eidetic memory since his nobility days, remembered everything he read. However, to avoid family disgrace, his father still arranged a tutor for him, though his parents did not pay much attention to him. One day, the captain of the mercenary group guarding their estate brought a young mercenary boy, who was Nicholas. Chad was advising Nicholas to send Alex away when he received a call from Daniel. They had started exchanging fire and needed the handyman's support. Consequently, Chad returned Nicholas's knife. When Warwick was still a noble, Nicholas had already been his bodyguard. However, being born to a prostitute, Nicholas faced an awkward situation at home. The next day, Warwick noticed that Nicholas had scars just like him, but his silent nature angered Warwick. It was only later that he learned Nicholas was deaf. Daniel's subordinates, Delico and Ivan, had just dealt with the enemy and were about to meet with their boss when a boy wearing a hood emerged from an alley. As one of Delico's men approached the boy, his head was chopped off. Delico immediately pursued the boy and called Yang, who was with the boss. However, it was too late. The boy attacked Yang, but Daniel managed to shoot and repel the boy just in time. Meanwhile, Nicholas, who was on his way, suddenly stopped and followed the smell of blood into an alley. He discovered the bodies of Daniel's men, with wounds very similar to his own style. Warwick immediately had a bad feeling. Daniel was surprised that someone dared to blatantly disregard the 3 major laws, but the boy didn't care about any laws. His mission was to bring Daniel's body back intact. He then charged into the crowd, slashing wildly. Meanwhile, in a nearby dark alley, 2 individuals were secretly watching the unfolding events, appearing to have privately hired Twilights. Warwick used to really dislike Nicholas, seeing him as useless because he was deaf. However, Nicholas simply remained silent and returned the book. At that moment, Warwick decided he wanted to understand Nicholas better. After dealing with someone, Nicholas was about to leave, but Warwick told him not to act recklessly. The situation with Daniel was grim. The boy charged through the crowd and swung his knife at Daniel's back, but Delico blocked the attack. Delico's tags fell to the ground. Unexpectedly, the Twilights hired by the Monroe family were the least effective D0 level. However, Daniel revealed that he had hired more than 1 Twilight. Nicholas appeared behind the boy, but his strike only broke the boy's knife. Both revealed the tags around their necks, each marked as a 0 level. The boy earns money by being intimate with women and joyfully takes the money to dine with his best friend, only to find him badly beaten again. Despite the treaty to protect Twilights, they still face discrimination. Ginger pushes open the doors of the Twilight Mercenary Guild and informs her boss, Gina, about Doug taking private commissions to fight the handyman. His next assignment turns out to be taking Daniel's head. Warwick is interrogating a captured criminal while Nicholas and Doug, both A0 level, are fighting fiercely. Below them, Daniel and others are placing bets since they can't intervene in an A-level fight. Delico watches the fight above, clutching his D-level tags. Daniel recounts a story from years ago when a Twilight at 14, with a C3 level, wiped out half of his family's force. The child targeted the family not for money or revenge, but because of a foolish act by one of Daniel's men. Warwick finds out that the Corsica family, not its head, but some members wanting to prove themselves, hired Doug. Unable to determine a winner quickly, Doug uses his jacket to block Nicholas's vision and stabs Nicholas's arms with 4 daggers. Doug then takes a swing at Daniel, but Delico immediately shields him. However, Nicholas throws Doug into an adjacent room. Seeing the mission failed, Doug escapes nimbly by jumping onto the rooftop. Nicholas, realizing his arm wounds missed the nerves and still under the effect of medication, wants to pursue Doug again. Warwick advises Daniel to contact the Twilight Mercenary Guild, as it could complicate matters if Doug were killed. It turns out that the C3 level Twilight who once stormed the Monroe family was Nicholas. When Warwick hurried to the scene, Nicholas and Doug were fighting again. Warwick hid in the shadows, hoping to assist. Suddenly, a figure appeared in front of him. The intense fight had already exhausted Doug, but despite his injuries, Nicholas remained composed. Doug realized Nicholas must have overdosed on drugs, yet Nicholas launched a fierce attack, shattering Doug's kukri knife with his katana. Just as Doug was about to be killed, Nicholas struck an empty wall. Ginger had moved Doug out of the way of the fatal strike and urged Nicholas to stop fighting. Even after recognizing Ginger as a member of the Mercenary Guild, Nicholas showed no intention of stopping. At that moment, Warwick tackled Nicholas to the ground and ordered him to put down his knife, reminding him not to attack civilians, to obey his master, and to protect himself. These are the 3 principles fought for by the 4 major families to free their vulnerable Twilights from slavery and secure their basic rights. Daniel was protected under these principles, and killing him would disrupt the balance of the entire street. Consequently, Gina shot Doug several times as punishment. Warwick tried to intervene, but Gina shot Nicholas in response. Instinctively reaching for his gun, Warwick found it swiftly taken by Ginger. Nicholas, clutching his chest, was puzzled by the pain, as the drug's effects should not have worn off yet. It turned out Gina had shot him with a tranquilizer. Gina pinned Nicholas against the wall, warning him against overdosing. Nicholas appeared indifferent, but Gina, holding a gun to his chest, emphasized that being willful was one thing, but causing too much trouble for his master was another. Rain began to fall on the street. Struggling, Warwick supported the weakened Nicholas, preparing to leave, only to spot Doug, who had been knocked unconscious. Alex was waiting in the shop for the 2 to return. However, as she looked down the stairs, she suddenly saw Barry standing at the entrance of the alley. Alex was terrified, thinking she was hallucinating. Barry was clearly dead. She had fired several shots at his body. How could he possibly be alive? Just as she breathed a sigh of relief, footsteps suddenly echoed in the hallway. Then, to Alex's horror, the door was pushed open. Nina seemed to sense something and changed into surgical attire early. Soon after, Warwick arrived at the hospital with Nicholas and Doug. The phone in the handyman's office rang urgently, but no one answered. A wet footprint was left on the stairs. All of Daniel's deceased subordinates had been transported back. Delico refused to go to the hospital and only allowed Yang to stitch up his wounds. Daniel angrily scolded Delico, reminding him that Twilights are human, just tougher, and he must always be a perfect shield. Delico was surprised that Daniel cared so much about him, but Miles felt Daniel was too indulgent with the children. Warwick learned from a minor member involved in hiring Doug that Uranos Corsica did not seek Daniel's life, but wanted control over the Cristiano family, which was under Daniel's influence. The situation was becoming increasingly tense, and war seemed inevitable. Ivan from their family had long been conspiring with the Corsica family, and even had informants in the police force helping him. During the war, the military developed a bioenhancement drug called Cerebret, which pushed soldiers' physical abilities to the extreme but led to many deaths due to its toxicity, leading to its ban after the war. Descendants of Cerebret users suffer from severe side effects and must take Cerebret daily to manage symptoms, earning them the name Twilights due to their short lifespans. Nicholas's medication is controlled by the mercenary group, and the daily dosage barely prevents his condition from worsening. To live properly, he must comply with humans. His birth was an accident. His mother was a prostitute who became pregnant after being bought by his father and was killed after giving birth to Nicholas. After getting to know Nicholas, Warwick taught him how to read. Nicholas was very silent, making Warwick feel like he was talking to an animal. He suspected Nicholas was a Twilight, but found no rank on his dog tag. One day, anti-Twilight activists invaded Warwick's home. His father immediately took others to a safe room but ignored Warwick. Nicholas exited through a window and easily dealt with the intruders, but the mercenary group still faced reprimand from their master, and Warwick was beaten by his father. Warwick found a book on sign language on the bookshelf, but saw Nicholas being injected with a syringe. Despite the treatment, Nicholas showed no intention of resisting, and once again sat silently across from Warwick, showing him the words he had learned. The anti-Twilight violence intensified, leading to hunts against Twilights in various places. To quell the unrest, the government recruited mercenaries from around the country to suppress the rebellion, and Nicholas joined them. Nina stopped Warwick from smoking in the hospital, which was inappropriate. She had already treated the wounds of Nicholas and Doug. Gina used a tranquilizer at 3 times the normal concentration because Doug has a strong resistance to drugs, so she had to inject him 4 times. Nina was able to prepare for surgery before their arrival because she has very sensitive hearing and can hear Warwick's voice no matter how far away. When Nicholas woke up, Warwick planned to return to the handyman office to check on things. He hurried home in the rain. A black sedan passed by him on the road. There were signs of someone on the stairs and bloodstains at the door. Warwick cautiously drew his gun and pushed open the door, only to find Dr. Theo inside. Alex had scratched him and then run away. Warwick had previously discussed Alex's condition with Theo, noting it was a side effect of the control drugs she was taking. Although these drugs last long, they are not toxic and non-addictive. However, once the drug effect weakens, the user can fall into severe, brief hallucinations. To escape these hallucinations, users become unusually dependent on their surroundings and objects provided by others, even if those objects are meaningless. Warwick rushed downstairs to look for people. Alex was in the alley below, holding money given by a client. The illusion of Barry constantly followed her. Alex feared that if she did not earn enough money, she would be beaten by Barry. Warwick used his own method to awaken Alex, and finally, the illusion of Barry wrapped around her disappeared. She hugged Warwick and couldn't help crying. Meanwhile, Nicholas pushed open the hospital window, and the sky finally cleared. Warwick watched from the fence as mercenaries carried away bodies one by one. Nicholas, covered in wounds, appeared before him and returned a book that had been destroyed in an explosion. Nicholas asked about the injury on Warwick's face, to which Warwick replied that he had fallen by accident. Since childhood, he was told that his friends would not live long, a common occurrence, according to doctors. Mercenaries and gangs often took Twilights as slaves, but Warwick didn't believe it. He had confirmed that Nicholas was not a Twilight. The doctor advised Warwick to give up. Although Cerebret could be bought with money, Twilights were doomed to a short life. Warwick awoke from a dream, and Alex comforted him by pulling him into her arms. Alex asked him why he had become like this, a question he had once asked, but never received an answer to. Doug only realized Nicholas was deaf after he woke up. which explained why he never responded to him. It turned out he had been embarrassingly talking to himself all along. At that moment, Chad brought news of the Mercenary Guild's decision to confine Doug. After all, he had attacked the Monroe family, and any misstep could implicate the entire guild. Later, Chad and Dr. Theo talked on the rooftop. Theo's autopsy revealed that all the individuals who had died on 6th Street were Twilights. The investigation had been slow due to the lack of crucial tags, but Warwick's help was fortunate. Arnold, who had previously caused trouble at the hospital, was also among the dead. None of the other victims had injuries that would have prevented them from moving, indicating they were in good health at the time of death. Moreover, the autopsy showed they had been dismembered alive, a feat beyond the capabilities of ordinary people like those from the Corsica family. Doug initially thought Nicholas was responsible for the incident on 6th Street, but he has now realized that was not the case. He also despises the 3 principles and the unwritten rules here. The anti-Twilight organization's activities continue, prompting the government to deploy a large number of mercenaries to suppress them. Nicholas was abandoned by the mercenary group due to the worsening of his condition. Warwick, very happy, ran over and pulled out the Cerebret he had bought with money. However, Nicholas gave him a look of despair, and lost in his memories, took the last pill. At the meeting of the 4 major families on this street, Loretta, the head of the Cristiano family, vehemently criticized Uranos for the killing of Twilights on 6th Street. However, Uranos denied any involvement with the Twilights.
You filthy old bastard! She's a damn head of our family!
Daniel suggested that only Twilights would be capable of such a massacre, hinting it might have been an inside job. He also did not rule out possible government involvement, since anything could happen on this street. Alex's condition has stabilized since then, and she has not seen Barry again. Dr. Theo prescribed her tranquilizers. Feeling guilty about hurting the doctor, Alex was advised to make some pastries and bring them next time as an apology. After leaving the hospital, Alex grabbed Nicholas and used the sign language she had recently learned, hoping he would let her stay longer. However, Nicholas indicated that she needed to relearn the sign language. The reason Warwick lost an eye was because his father burned it with a cigarette. Nicholas silently watched until Warwick called for help. Without hesitation, Nicholas killed Warwick's father and then pointed the knife at his own throat. Warwick knocked the knife from Nicholas's hand, ordering him not to die easily. He said Nicholas should endure suffering and then die a painful death. Nicholas obeyed Warwick's command and personally removed Warwick's damaged eyeball. As Warwick was recalling the past, he ran into Delico, who was on patrol. Delico criticized Warwick for being too unguarded, allowing Nicholas to always act alone. He worried about what would happen if hunters targeting Twilights set their sights on them. Warwick, however, was indifferent, saying that dying would only mean one less burden, but Nicholas could not die until all other nuisances were gone. The mysterious forces targeting Twilights continued their hunt. The handymen are helping repair a gun shop. Alex was invited by Connie to come in for tea and rest. It turns out that the shop's granny is Connie's grandmother. Seeing Alex still with the handymen, Granny asked why she hadn't left yet, suggesting she would soon return to her old ways, as she had seen many like her before. Connie quickly assured her that Granny was sharp-tongued but kind-hearted, actually always worried about Alex encountering bad clients. Connie asked Alex how long she planned to stay with the handymen and whether she intended to return to her family. Suddenly, Alex began to tremble. She remembered having a brother but could not recall any details. The more she thought about it, the more the image of Barry appeared. She reassured herself it was just the effects of the tranquilizer wearing off. With trembling hands, she tried to open her medication but couldn't twist the cap. Nicholas came up behind her, hugged her, and opened the cap, causing the hallucination to disappear. Alex had been caring for her brother alone since their mother was absent. However, since taking the control drugs, her memories had become blurry. Warwick comforted her, saying that the memories taken away by the medication would gradually return after she stopped taking it. If she remembered her family and wanted to go home, she could leave then. Until that time, she was welcome to consider the handyman office her home. The girl is the head of a mafia family. Warwick took Alex to a party hosted by the Cristiano family. Alex was surprised to see such a young family leader as Loretta. However, Loretta was quite envious of Alex's figure, noting that she too bears the responsibility of protecting the lives of Twilights. Each of the 4 major families on the street has its own area of responsibility. The Twilights Mercenary Guild is in charge of dispatching mercenaries. The Corsica family handles weapons trade and the entertainment industry. The Monroe family supports Twilight's not affiliated with the guild and controls commerce, and the Cristiano family manages the circulation of cerebret, essential for the life of Twilight's. Galahad continuously complimented Alex's figure, to which Warwick jokingly said it costs $100 to look once, resulting in Alex slapping him. Nicholas did not attend the party. Instead, he stayed outside to monitor the anti-Twilight organizations. These groups have recently resumed their massacres of Twilights. The purpose of the Cristiano family's party was to provide shelter for Twilights during this period. Warwick and Nicholas's job tonight was to safely bring Twilights into the venue. Loretta was aware of the risks of hosting a party during such a time but was not afraid. She had duties to fulfill, and her subordinates were tasked with clearing away any trouble. Chaos started erupting on the street. Alex heard gunshots and wanted to find Loretta, but Galahad quickly covered her mouth. The government had been watching them because they controlled the distribution of cerebret and could not openly assist Twilights. Even if the handymen were in danger, they could not intervene. As a member of the handymen, Alex also had to work, right? Galahad then pushed Alex onto the stage, introducing her as a new singer. Everyone knew she often hummed tunes casually. This was why Warwick brought her to the party. With Galahad's accompaniment, Alex had no choice but to perform. Her singing beautifully calmed the Twilights present, and it also triggered her memories of childhood times with her brother. Warwick and Nicholas continued to bring more Twilights into the party. A man passing by the entrance heard Alex's singing but was denied entry because he was not a Twilight. Despite the outwardly calm atmosphere, someone was already targeting them. A man holding a knife stared nervously at Loretta. His daughter had been kidnapped, and he was threatened to assassinate the head of the Cristiano family. Alex performed as a temporary singer at the party, and overall the effect was quite good. Loretta came over to chat with Alex, sharing that her mother was also a prostitute, but was not as fortunate as Alex because she could not withstand the effects of drug-induced hallucinations and died shortly after giving birth to her. At that moment, Ivan, representing the Monroe family, came to deliver money to Loretta. Loretta smelled blood on him. Ivan, excusing himself for having just dealt with a body, secretly moved next to the man and showed him an ear stored in his handkerchief. Enraged, the man charged at Loretta, but was knocked away by a punch from Galahad. More people, signaled by Ivan, then surrounded them. Marco used a steel wire to fend off the attackers. Loretta approached the man who attacked her to demand the name of the mastermind, threatening to kill him and feed him to dogs if he refused to speak. A boy jumped down from the second floor, killed the man, and snatched his tags. The scene became very chaotic. Loretta tried to calm the crowd but was knocked over. Just as she was about to be injured by broken glass on the ground, Alex timely tackled her to the ground. At that moment, Ivan issued an order to a woman with white hair. Warwick and Nicholas had just finished their task but found the scene in total chaos. Witnesses described a child brutally killing Twilights and taking their tags. Remembering the earlier incident on 6th Street, Warwick had a bad feeling and sent Nicholas to buy some time. Galahad punched the boy into a pillar, but to his surprise, the boy was unharmed and stopped Galahad's punch with just one hand. Marco used a steel wire to fling the boy, and the tags he had taken were retrieved by Marco. The Twilights at the entrance were all killed by the white-haired woman. Loretta handed Alex a gun and told her to escape through the back door, while she returned to the battlefield. Alex, in a daze, thought she saw her brother's shadow. The boy was incredibly strong but did not carry tags. If he were a Twilight, the government should have been monitoring him, and the 4 families would surely have known about him. Seeing that Marco and Galahad refused to return his tags, the boy kicked Galahad over. Despite being just a child, his strength and agility were top-notch. However, because he was a child, he was quickly subdued under the combined efforts of Galahad and Marco. Just then, the white-haired woman Erica arrived. She swung her sword at Marco while the boy took the chance to kick Galahad away. Erica sliced through the necklace around Marco's neck, but it was not. Tags, it was a ring. Warwick issued a red flare from the rooftop, alerting everyone on the street. The boy, dragging Galahad, picked up the ring and examined it closely. Surprisingly, Marco was not a Twilight. Marco stated that murderous hands were unworthy of touching it. His finger was cut, and blood splattered onto his body, causing the boy's expression to turn grim. He picked up a beer bottle, intending to kill Marco, but 2 gunshots rang out from above. Loretta fired several shots at Erica, warning her not to attack her subordinates. However, Erica easily cut through the gun barrel with her sword. Alex did not flee. Instead, she returned to save Loretta, but her pistol quickly ran out of bullets. Erica then aimed her knife at Alex, but Nicholas rushed in and tackled her. Recognizing her resemblance to Delico, Nicholas realized she was more skilled than her brother. The two engaged in a knife fight. Galahad shouted for Nicholas to back off, claiming Erica was beyond his capacity to handle. But Nicholas looked thrilled by the challenge. With Galahad and Marco injured, they had no choice but to leave Erica to Nicholas. Loretta then ordered everyone to retreat. Warwick arrived at the party to find many people dead, with empty medicine bottles scattered on the ground. Nicholas had obviously overdosed again. Warwick was also shocked to see who Nicholas was fighting against. Alex asked Galahad why he called Nicholas an imposter. The ranks of Twilights depend solely on their abilities. The stronger the ability, the higher the rank. However, Nicholas enhances his physical capabilities with drugs, and his actual rank would be at most B5. Under the attack of two monstrous opponents, Nicholas was quickly stabbed in the shoulder and defeated. Just when it seemed he would perish there, Ginger appeared like a ghost and knocked Erica to the ground. They had come in response to the distress signal fired by Warwick. Ginger holds an S5 rank. Consequently, Erica and the boy decided to retreat. Warwick scolded Nicholas for getting injured again, but Nicholas was proud of buying them 5 minutes. Chad arrived with the police and surrounded the party, but the main culprits still managed to escape under their watch. The party, originally held to protect Twilights, ended in a massacre. Loretta picked up a crying baby from her deceased mother's arms, questioning if she had made a mistake. Warwick borrowed a phone from Chad to call the Monroe family. There was something he needed to inform Delico about. The attack tonight was orchestrated by Ivan in collaboration with Uranos, and the man who had been kicked out of the party, Alex's brother Emilio, had joined Uranos. The massacre targeting Twilights was just beginning. Galahad, Marco, and Nicholas were taken to Dr. Theo's hospital for treatment. Upon arrival, Nicholas became very obedient under Dr. Theo's authority, making Alex suspect he was being blackmailed. Dr. Theo is the only doctor who supports Twilights, and the cerebret they use is refined by the doctor from raw materials. Due to the high cost of cerebret, impoverished Twilights and orphans cannot afford it, and thus seek refuge with the doctor. Nicholas has received much care from him and owes many favors, which over time has made it hard for him to lift his head. After all, they can only rely on the doctor. Warwick was at the police station helping to identify bodies. He has a congenital hyperthymesia, allowing him to remember everything perfectly, which is a key reason why the handymen are not affiliated with any organization. In some ways, he is considered more dangerous than Nicholas, as the damage from him switching sides would be immeasurable. Connie ran into the hospital out of breath and hugged Marco, who was on the hospital bed. It turned out they were a couple, and the ring he cherished was given to him by Connie. Warwick went to the Monroe family and informed Delico that Erica had become a hunter of Twilights. Erica is indeed Delico's twin sister. Previously, a Twilight orphanage was attacked, and young Warwick and Nicholas had saved Yang and Delico in the ruins, but Erica was missing. Delico had thought she was dead until he heard this news. Connie hugged Alex tightly, thanking her for protecting Loretta, and asked her not to reveal her relationship with Marco. Then, she handed Alex a key and advised her again to leave the area as a war was about to happen. Originally protected by the three principals, the Cristiano family has fallen into such a dire situation. It's only a matter of time before the Monroe family is attacked. Although the family has many talented members, in the end, the only reliable one is Delico, a Twilight. Although the return of him and Nicholas could alleviate the crisis, their adversaries include those who even Galahad cannot handle, and government surveillance has increased. At this moment, Warwick unexpectedly bumped into a man he had never seen before. The Mercenary Guild was in contact with Galahad to send more reinforcements when suddenly their phone line was cut. A woman wielding an axe burst into the scene. Commander Bors immediately mobilized his men to act and sent someone to escort Doug to find Galahad. Twilights have a lifespan of about 30 to 35 years. Their short lives are the price of using their abilities, and cerebret also contains strong toxicity. Developing an alternative is very challenging. If the intake of cerebret is delayed, the vitality of Twilight significantly decreases, and they can even die. Alex found Warwick's notes about Twilights and learned everything about them. Meanwhile, Doug and his group were ambushed by Sig, and Daniel was held hostage by the traitor Ivan. With the lack of support from the Cristiano family, the Monroe family, with only a D-ranked Twilight, is hardly a threat.
Go, Doug! Run!
Delico prepared his gear to search for his sister, but acting alone could lead to severe punishment if discovered. Yang decided to join him. They grew up together in an orphanage, and both regretted not protecting Erica back then. Loretta called the orphanage, and the director agreed to take in the homeless baby. Holding the child, Alex joyfully blurted out a name and then burst into tears upon remembering her brother's name, Emilio. By this time, Emilio had joined a hunting organization and was carrying out bombings in the streets. Doug went to notify Chad, but suddenly his chest was splattered with blood. Smoke billowed from the location of the mercenary guild, drawing onlookers from the street. Hunters targeting Twilights roamed the streets. Marco bought many guns from Connie and also made a special farewell. Loretta left the handyman and returned to the Cristiano family. Yang and Delico, with childhood photos in hand, asked around but found nothing. The street disturbances made them anticipate that things would get more complicated. If they couldn't find Erica soon, Daniel might fall into danger. Erica's activities were at night, making it impossible to find witnesses. Just as they were about to head to 7th Street in search, a person hiding in an alley mistook Delico for Erica. Galahad was initially headed to the guild, but was caught off guard by a sudden change of events on the way. The streets were littered with the bodies of murdered Twilights, and explosions were heard from the mercenary guild. Galahad quickly evacuated the onlookers and instructed Granny to take Connie to the handyman for shelter. The situation at the mercenary guild was dire, with 2 hunters breaking in and going on a rampage. The explosions and smoke impaired the Twilight's vision and smell, making them no match for the hunters.
Intruders, ma'am. We count 3, though judging by their finesse, it's clear we're dealing with skilled hunters.
However, Gina was not panicked. Colt attempted a surprise attack on Gina, but Ginger quickly intercepted him. The sight of bodies everywhere on the streets annoyed Gina, who handed the enemies over to her subordinates and decided to go back to sleep. However, Sig mocked her for hiding behind her subordinates.
Shut the hell up!
But Gina couldn't be bothered to speak with such trash and instructed her subordinates to handle the intruders. At that moment, Emilio threw a bomb, forcing them to retreat. Before leaving, the 2 informed Gina that they were part of the Corsica family's 3rd expulsion squad. Soon, the Cristiano family was informed about the battle between the mercenary guild and the hunters. Marco suddenly had a bad feeling and hurriedly ran out. Meanwhile, Delico was attacked by a child named Heather, who was shouting about avenging her sister. Heather's sister had been killed by Erica on the night of the party, and she had been searching for Erica to seek revenge. Instead, she encountered Delico, who looked just like Erica. Delico revealed his identity to Heather, and wanting to prevent others from suffering as she had, knew he must stop Erica. On his way to the mercenary guild, Galahad encountered Doug, who was severely injured. With his last breath, Doug relayed that headquarters was safe, handed his tags to Galahad, and then stopped breathing. Connie rushed back to Granny's smoke shop and found a black-haired woman waiting there to buy cigarettes. Connie chatted with her without suspicion, but the woman suddenly grabbed her, claiming she smelled a familiar man on her. When Marco hurried over, only Connie's hat was left behind. It started raining heavily. Alex dreamed about many past events. Her mother was killed by Twilights, and since then, her father harbored a deep hatred for Twilights. To support her brother and father, Alex followed Barry to this street and became a prostitute. She dreamed of Nicholas covered in blood, lying on the ground. Alex woke up crying, and then Nicholas handed her a hot cup of tea. Feeling that the scene with Nicholas was more than a dream, Alex asked him if they had met before. Before Nicholas could answer, someone knocked on the door. It was a request from the Cristiano family. Galahad had not returned from the mercenary guild, and they hoped Nicholas could temporarily take over his guard duties, especially since Connie had also disappeared. Nicholas put on his coat and followed the 2 men out. Alex wanted to go too, but Nicholas refused her. Marco clutched Connie's hat, sinking into despair alone. Granny hit him with her cane, venting her anger. Her son and daughter-in-law had died at the hands of the expulsion squad, and now her only granddaughter was also at risk. Hadn't Marco sworn to prevent such tragedies from happening again? Furious, Granny left the scene. Nicholas caught up and draped a coat over Granny, realizing that if she lost Connie, she would truly be alone. The expulsion squad, specialized hunters targeting Twilights, should have been disbanded 15 years ago. Marco was once a hunter from the 2nd expulsion squad, but had joined the Cristiano family afterwards. The kidnapping of Connie was likely an act of revenge against Marco. Warwick visited the Monroe family and, led by Miles, went to find Daniel. Hearing that Daniel was with Ivan, Warwick grew suspicious, piecing together recent events. Miles finally realized something was off with Ivan, but it was too late. Both Ivan and Daniel had disappeared. At that moment, the white-haired man previously seen appeared at the door. During the war, a few ordinary people who were unaffected by the toxicity of cerebrate but had physical abilities comparable to Twilight's were raised as hunters. Marco was once among them. Among these hunters, a man named Stryker was particularly fearsome. Marco had been with the Cristiano family for 15 years, too accustomed to a comfortable life to protect his masters while confronting these threats. Then Loretta had someone bring her father's phone book, making calls to gather information and sending people to search for targets while avoiding Uranos' agents. As she prepared to act, Marco panicked. Loretta, one of the 4 major family leaders, was in charge of the fate of her family and the Twilights. What if something happened to her over personal matters? Loretta was resolute. Marco had given everything for their family. Now it was their turn to reciprocate. The Cristiano family would never abandon one of their own. In a moment, Marco saw the image of the former family head in Loretta. Elsewhere, Stryker was massacring at the Monroe family. Warwick prepared to cover Miles as they retreated to rescue Daniel, but Miles had no intention of leaving. Daniel had once said not to look for him. He wanted to settle things with that group himself. Thus, Miles decided to stay and buy time for Daniel. Without hesitation, Warwick also chose to stay. Stryker breached the last line of defense. However, the person sitting inside when the door was opened was not Daniel. Warwick, hanging from a window, shot at Stryker. Stryker pulled out his weapon to defend. Warwick and Stryker took the opportunity to launch a surprise attack. However, Stryker's skills were formidable, and it didn't take long for him to overpower them. Warwick thought Stryker was there to kill Daniel as part of a mission to expel Twilights, but the tone suggested that Stryker and Daniel knew each other. Miles attempted a surprise attack but was kicked away by Stryker, who then stabbed Warwick in the abdomen. However, Warwick managed to inject Stryker in the neck with a tranquilizer. Consequently, Stryker threw Warwick out of the window.
It's Warwick.
As for Daniel, he was being taken by Ivan to meet a significant figure. From a young age, Warwick was told that he was different from the Twilights, just a powerless and vulnerable ordinary person, while Twilights were beasts that had to obey ordinary people. Warwick could never become one of them. Warwick lay in the cold rain, never having claimed he wanted to be a Twilight.